I was and remain a strong proponent of our enhanced interrogation program. The interrogations were used on hardened terrorists after other efforts had failed. They were legal, essential, justified, successful, and the right thing to do.
The Fuller Brush man sowing torture. Anyway, welcome back to Hardball. Not so fast, Mr. Vice President there. Dick Cheney's certitude, you just heard, is being challenged in a Senate Intelligence Committee report on the CIA's detention and interrogation program itself.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you back to the Steve Malzberg Show, and you'll see the reason why I played that very annoying, that's putting it nicely, a clip of Chris Matthews taking on Dick Cheney. We are joined right now by the former Deputy Assistant U.S. Attorney General in the Office of Legal Counsel, Department of Justice during the George W. Bush administration. He played an important role in advancing the legal justification for the Bush administration's policy on the war on terror. I have been, as I told him, a longtime admirer of his. He's also a professor of law at the University of California, Berkeley, and a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, and perhaps most importantly right now, the author of a great new book, Point of Attack: Preventative War, International Law, and Global Warfare. And very happy to say hello to John Yoo. It is such a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. When you see and hear comments like Chris Matthews just made, and it's commonplace in the media to this day, I call it Bush and Cheney derangement syndrome, for which there is no cure. What goes through your mind?
Well, first, these are all people who were never in the position of having to make a decision under the circumstances of 1 month, 2 months, 3 months after the 9/11 attacks, just a few blocks from here, where terrorists killed 3,000 American citizens. We expected follow-on attacks. We were lucky enough to capture the very top leaders of al-Qaeda who were not cooperating, and they're not going to cooperate. They would rather die, right? They want to die in their operations. The only way to stop future terrorist attacks is to get the information from them about what they're planning for the future. And so it's easy to say, oh, you went too far, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. None of these critics ever has to answer the question, what would you do in that situation? I think anybody who would have said, we should send them to Foley Square for a trial in federal district court.
Would have been run out of the country.
They'd be impeached and be thrown out of the country, and they would have been derelict in their duty, I think.
Absolutely. When you hear it referred to as, with this resurgence of this issue, because of this study by the Senate committee, and you hear it constantly referred to as torture, and when you hear it from the day the president took office, it's not who we are. I mean, again, you had a big hand in saying that yes, these acts of interrogation were legal, were not torture. So again, how do you answer those critics?
Yeah, two thoughts. First, would any government go through all the trouble and time and exercise we did to make sure that legally we were not torturing people? That was the whole point, was to say, what does our law say we can and cannot do? And that was the important point. The second thing I would say is, I think that a lot of this is second-guessing, armchair quarterbacking, and it's worse than that. I think President Obama, to his credit, used drones and has gone after Osama bin Laden and the top leadership of al-Qaeda. All of that is building and taking advantage of all the intelligence that was gathered from these interrogations. If the president really believed that, if Senator Feinstein, who's chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, believes that this was wrong and that we shouldn't have done this, then they shouldn't use any of the information in any of their policies, but they're reaping all the benefits from it. And to their credit, I want them to protect the country. I want them to be hypocrites and protect the country rather than be true to their principles and allow another 9/11 attack to occur.
Is it true? I mean, Mary Matlin, who was Dick Cheney's counsel at the time, I mean, and others, and Ari Fleischer, they've told us that Dianne Feinstein and the other members of these committees, they were told, I mean, and Pelosi, it was revealed many years ago that she was at these meetings. They were told what was going on. They were aware of it. Now they feign outrage and we didn't know, and oh my God, look what they did to these people. But did they not know?
Oh, of course. The thing, despite all the things that are said, at the time, the Bush administration wanted to cooperate with Congress. They wanted to work together because they wanted a country to be unified in fighting against the 9/11 hijackers and the al-Qaeda threat. And so the members of Congress who are in the charge of the intelligence were fully briefed. There were no objections raised by any of these members of Congress. Look, members of Congress, they're happy for the executive branch to take the responsibility to fight the war. If things go bad, then they're going to blame you. If things go well, they took credit for it too. that's just the way Congress works these days. But what's, I think, unfair and wrong is for them to say that you went too far, that you shouldn't have done that. They never propose any alternatives. And they have reaped the benefits of all that intelligence that was gathered.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great point. And I'm going to get to your book. I want to, because it's a natural extension of everything we're talking about. But what was it like? Think back, and what was the first thing you were asked or presented with? How did this come about?
Well, I was at the Justice Department, and Washington also was one of the targets that was attacked on the morning of 9/11. The Pentagon was attacked. And we know the fourth plane was going to head for the Capitol or the White House. The mother of all traffic jams occurred because, if you remember, the city of Washington was evacuated. Yeah. But luckily or unluckily, I was one of the people who had to stay behind and ensure that there was some leadership in the Capitol to develop the response. First thing we're asked is, what can we do in response? Are we at war, or is this a crime? Yeah. And I think people, like the excerpt you just played, people who, in fact, this administration too, pretend this is a crime, I think they're completely wrong. I think if they were there on 9/11, saw the attack on the towers, saw the attack on the Pentagon, saw the terrible things Al-Qaeda has done, how could you think that this is a criminal act for which we use prosecutors and FBI agents and have trials? But I always ask people this, if the Soviet Union had attacked us exactly the same way,
would we say it was a crime?
Would we say it was a crime or an act of war?
Yeah.
Everybody would say it was an act of war. And that's the first decision that I had to make in response to a question from the White House, was to decide, are we at war? Can we use all the spectrum of military responses? Or are we limited to, Law and Order TV show, Miranda, prosecutors,
and your opinion immediately was?
It's a war, clearly a war.
Yeah. 30 seconds before we get to the break and then come back, your opinion of George W. Bush.
I think he was a very strong leader at a difficult time. He knew no matter what he did, it was going to be controversial. And he made his decisions, I think this reminds me very much of Abraham Lincoln. He made his decisions without regard to public opinion, but he did what he thought was right.
Love the country?
Yes.
Everything for love of country. All right, we're coming back, ladies and gentlemen. John Yoo is here, and we have a lot more to get to with him. His new book, which talks about where we are now, the Obama administration and their tactics, drones, etc. So we will talk to him. The book is Point of Attack, Preventative War, International Law, and Global Warfare. We'll also try to sneak in a question on the NBA and their decision on Donald Sterling, if we're lucky, right here. Coming back on the Steve Malzberg Show on Newsmax Television. Don't go away.